Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today I'm going to teach you how to make my pattern Medallion Star. I really love this pattern because it is a great scrap buster. You can use 1/4 and 1/3 yard cuts to make this entire quilt, or you could go and use all the fabrics from your favorite fabric line as well. We have kits to go with the version I'm making you today, at least at the time I'm filming this, and we're doing batiks for this one. If you get a kit from us, it comes with a nice swatch chart, so it shows you exactly what fabric I used in which place, because all the places are numbered of where these diamonds go. And we also have a free printable guide that you can use to help determine your own color placement if you are doing this yourself with your scraps. So you can get both the pattern and everything else you need for this over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We'll have links directly to everything in the description for this video. So this one is super fun because it's lots of really fun diamonds and there are no Y seams ever. I hate Y seams, and so we're going to avoid them, and I'm going to show you how. A few things you need to do this is you absolutely need a 60-degree ruler that has all 3 points. Sometimes manufacturers will knock off the tip of this point, and the idea is that you can cut more or whatever or make better use of your fabric, but the math is very different for 60-degree triangle and diamond patterns that use a ruler that has all 3 points versus one that doesn't. So go check your ruler collection, see if you have one that has all 3 points, and if you don't, I highly recommend the Clearview Triangle ruler. I've got the 8-inch because I can do lots of different size projects with it, and we have that at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Again, it's super critical. You will not get enough diamonds and your quilt will not turn out the same size if you use one that doesn't have that tip, that triangle tip. So very important. And it says that on the back of the pattern, but I know people don't always read the directions. So step 1 is getting that. Step 2 is deciding where you want everything to go. If you get one of our kits, we've done that for you, but you also can use our free color placement chart that you can download as a PDF, and we've got that link there. One other big tip I would make is, you can see I've got all these little stickers on here. So I have labeled what fabrics go in what spots. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and so on. So that way when I'm arranging my wedges, it's super easy to go together. So this quilt, it goes together real nice and simple. I'm going to show you on here. So what you do is we're going to end up sewing together wedges. So there's one wedge, here's a center, and then here's one over here. And those are reflected in the other side. So you get 2 of each wedge, and what you do is you sew the wedges to the center, and then you sew your halves together, and you're done. I made 2 of these quilt tops in one weekend, sent my kid to grandma's in order to make it happen because it was like pre-quilt market craziness. But I did this original one and the one that's on the back of the pattern. I did both those tops in one weekend, and it wasn't bad. I'm able to get 2 wedges together in about 2 hours because I'll make 2 at a time. It's like this wedge and this wedge are the same. You'll see that when you look at your pattern. But it's super fast because you're really not doing any block piecing. Once you cut your diamonds, you're already piecing your top together and you're good to go. So I'm going to first show you how to cut using your triangle, 60-degree triangle ruler, and then I'm going to show you how to sew them together to get perfect points using diagonal rows and how we can avoid those Y seams. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is unfold your strip because we want to make sure we're able to get enough from the width of fabric. And what we're going to do first is we're going to line up our ruler with our inch line even with the bottom edge, and then the tip is going to be even with the top. So that's going to ensure that we have a nice 60-degree cut going along here. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to cut this edge off. So now that I have this edge off, it's time for me to flip my ruler around, and I'm going to now line up my inch line with the top of my strip, and I am moving this over so that the edge of the ruler is even with the top corner right here, and then the bottom tip is even with the bottom. So once I've got that all situated, I can cut again, this time on the right side. So I've got one diamond down. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. So now from going on forward, all I have to do is I don't have to flip my rule around anymore because I've already got it started. You only have to do that for your first cut. So now I can just keep lining it up with the edge of the ruler, the left side, even with the tip, the bottom point, even with the bottom of my strip, and that inch line going all the way across, and I can just keep cutting all the way down the rest of the strip. So you're going to keep cutting until you've cut everything according to the instructions in the pattern to go along with this. Again, that's called Medallion Star. And again, I highly recommend that you label these. I just got little labels from the office supply store and I just labeled them 1 through 17. So that way when I start to arrange my fabric, I know exactly where it's supposed to be and which one is supposed to be going there. The other thing I do is I'm going to pull from the bottom first because I've got my little notation on the top fabric, so I'm going to pull from the ones underneath it. That way I don't forget what's what and accidentally use one and not know what's what. Okay, so that's it. Once you have everything cut, you're ready to start assembling your top. That's why this pattern is so fast, but it looks super stunning when it is all done. All right, so I'm going to show you how to make this wedge here in the pattern on the video today. For the rest of the instructions are all detailed in the pattern, and once you know how to do one wedge, you can do the rest of them. So I'm going to show you how to do that in today's video, and we're going to get started here. So we're going to be making wedge 3 in this video, so make sure you open up your pattern to follow along with this, but it's totally fine to just watch it if you're checking it out so you can kind of see the technique of how it all goes together and then get the pattern later too. That's perfectly fine and acceptable. So what I want to do is I want to start selecting my fabrics based on what I'm told to get in this layout diagram. And I'm just gonna lay this out in order. I'm not gonna put them like out like this because this does take up a lot of space because you're essentially putting your quilt top together right now. And I don't know about you, but my table is not big enough to lay the entire wedge out. So I just kind of overlap them like this. That way I know what direction and what order they're supposed to be in as I'm searching it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull all these and get my first 2 rows together, and then we'll come back and show you how to sew them together. All right, so I've got my first row, all my diamonds that belong in that, and I'm gonna start with my bottom 2 to sew together. That way you can clearly see what this looks like when you sew them together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set these to the side for now and lay these out the way they would be in the actual diamond wedge that we're creating right now. So when you sew these together, it's going to look a little different because one half of your diamond is going to the left and one is going to the right. So when we put these right sides together, it ends up looking like this. And that's okay. This is exactly how this is supposed to look with the 2 diamonds going in the opposite directions, because then when we sew our 1/4 inch seam and fold that open, it's going to be a nice straight strip. Now, once you get the hang of this, you don't have to mark it every time, but I recommend that you mark your 1/4 inch line to start with so you know where you're supposed to pin and you can get a nice straight join when you sew these together. I'm using a nice black pen here so that you guys can see it on camera. I recommend you use a pencil at home because it's not going to bleed on your fabric when it gets washed eventually. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the 1/4 inch line from my ruler even with the edge of that diamond. So that way I can mark where my 1/4 inch is supposed to be on this. Because where this 1/4 inch is exactly where that seam is supposed to be coming out. So now I don't pin this when I do it because I've done like a million of these, but when you're first starting, what you want to do is line it up so that that little black mark is right even with the edge of where this is. So that way your seam line is going to come right in that center of where those 2 triangles meet. And I'm going to put a pin there to hold it. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to line these edges up even and then get my nice black mark even with the edge of where that purple fabric is. Put a pin in there. And I'm pinning fairly close to where the edges are because it wouldn't do much good to pin like in here because then things can move on you while you're sewing. I want to pin pretty close to where I'm sewing so it keeps everything in place and then we have a nice great join. All right, so now it's time to start sewing. So now I have my sewing machine set up to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and as long as we've done everything correctly, we should be coming in right where those 2 triangles meet and where that line is that we marked. Go ahead and pull my pin. slow down as I come to this tip. Go ahead and pull that pin out, and I'm trying to come out right where this corner is. All right, so now if I open this up, I should have a nice smooth line, which I do from point to point. I'm gonna press this open because I feel that that makes it lie even flatter and helps you get really great perfect point joins when we put the top together. So whenever I'm pressing seams open, I usually put 3 or 4 fingers in front of that seam to sort of finger press it open ahead of time. I find that that really helps it lay nice and flat. You don't want to see any wiggles on here because then that means that you have a pleat on the other side. And once I'm done, I give it a nice little press from the other side as well. So when I'm done, I always kind of lay everything back out in the order that it should be, just to verify that I've got everything going in the right direction, because otherwise I will screw something up. So now what I need to do is I need to sew the rest of these together just like this. So I'm going to do that, and you guys should too, to get your first row together. And just a tip, whenever I'm making these, since we have 2 identical wedges in every single Medallion Star top, I usually do those 2 at the same time. So like I would make 2 of these where I'm sewing piece 1 to piece 2, and then that's good to go, so you don't have to go through the process twice. It just speeds everything up a little bit. So I'm going to sew these guys together, and then we will get going with assembling our rows to each other. All right, so I've got everything laid out again. This time it's in sets of 2. So what I did was I double checked with my layout diagram to make sure that I had all my numbers in the right spot and that everything is going from the bottom left to the top right for this wedge, because you don't want it to be going the other way, because then it will, you know, for example, if this was going in this direction, it would be bad. You would have sewed one edge wrong together. So make sure that everything is going in the same direction when you do this. And then it's the exact same process, just it is a bigger diamond that we're doing. So here you can see that these are going to go together and they're going to still be going in opposite directions, but we still want about a 1/4 inch popping off on both sides of this. And as long as you do that, you're going to be good. I'm going to go ahead and pin these, and then we'll put them through the sewing machine, and then our first row is done. Well, almost done. We still have to sew them to each other. So same deal, again, we're just gonna flip these guys right sides together. Just now we have some really long rows, and I'm gonna go ahead and sew this together. Again, making sure that my points are about a 1/4 inch away from the edge where these little guys come together. All right, one last seam to press open, and then we are done with our first row. All right, so row 1 is done. We've assembled it on the diagonal, and we are ready for row 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that together off camera, because it's the exact same process, just with different colors of fabric. And then I'll come back and show you guys how I pin this together to get perfect joints every single time. So I finished those 2 long rows that we started with, and now I'm going to sew these together and show you how I pin to get perfect points every single time. So first I'm going to put everything right sides together, and it's important to show you here too that just how everything's going in opposite directions, that's going to be the same way for this one. We're going to have the row underneath is going to be coming out, and then we're still going to have the next row is going to be going in the opposite direction, and then when it's sewn together, you're going to have a nice straight seam here. So what I've done is I've taken that black pen to put a little bit of a dash a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the seam, and I've done that on the other side as well. going across where this is. So what I'm going to do, this is a 2-penny method. It works really great to keep everything where it should be. So I'm going to put a pin in right where that seam is and where that dash is. And then I'm going to find the same spot on the other side. All right, so now I've got my pin going straight through that seam right where the dash is, a 1/4 inch away. So now what I want to do is I want to line these guys up and get it so that my pin is going straight up and down through that fabric. And if you notice, like, these little points aren't necessarily lining up perfectly, that's okay, but your joins are going to be matched up perfectly, and that's what you want. So now I'm going to take a second pin while I pinch this between my thumb and forefinger to keep it nice and straight through. Now I'm going to pin across that seam, and once that's through, then I can remove it. What that does is if I were to rock that pin that was going straight up and down, it would move the top one forward and the bottom one back, and then those points would no longer be in alignment, and that's when you get points that aren't perfect when you put them together. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing that throughout the rest of my row, and then I'm going to sew this guy together. So sewing everything together is exactly the same as when you were doing 2 together, just it's a lot longer strip. I still want to be about a 1/4 inch away so that my needle is going to go right in between where these little valleys are. And I just sew until I can get as close to that pin as possible, and then I remove it, and that keeps everything in place as long as possible until, so you don't have so much shifting and you get nice great points. So just like when we were putting the 2 little ones together, now we're going to press these guys open. Just it's going to be a nice long strip. Just like before, I'm going to start with that nose going straight down the center and kind of open everything up with my fingertips ahead of that iron. You can kind of tell at this point if you've done it right, because if these all come together very nicely in the points, then you're going to have a nice join on the other side as well. So I'm very happy with how this is turning out. If it ever is not the way you want it to be, you just need to rip about 1 inch or so on either side, repin and do it again. You don't need to rip the whole seam. But it's all totally up to you. If it's not going to bother you, go ahead and leave it, as long as you know your diamond is nice and straight. As long as these edges are nice and straight, that's what matters. All right, so I'm going to continue pressing this, and then we're going to put the rest of our top together. All right, so I've got my 2 rows sewn together, and I already sewed together the additional 4 rows to go with that. So I'm ready to just put this together. It's the exact same process as we did before, just your rows get a little bit smaller as you get a little further out into that diamond. So go ahead and put the rest of your wedge together, and then I'm going to show you how to trim up the edges and give you a little tip for the center wedge, because the diamonds are a little bit different when you get to the very end. So I've assembled my wedge, and we have all of these ends on the side here that need to get trimmed off. Now in the pattern, it's going to tell you to wait until you get your entire quilt top together, but I'm just doing the wedge because I've already made my quilt top and quilted it. So I'm going to show you how to trim it here. So just pretend that our whole quilt top is assembled already. So what I want to do is even this up, because this, where my ruler is supposed to be the edge of the quilt, and that will be nice and straight on the edge when you're all done. So what I'm doing here is I am lining up a 1/4 inch mark on my ruler with the edge of the points of my diamonds here and here. And it'll be easier to tell at the bottom too, because this will be against the straight edge of your center wedge as well. So you have something to line up with at the bottom as well. So now that I know that I've got these two in line, I know it's going to be nice and square. So I can just take my rotary cutter and slice off the edge. Put that to the side. Now we have one straight edge, so I'm going to pull it down as we have some more to trim here. All right, so now I'm lining up with the part that I've already cut, and you're really not going to be able to see it on camera because this is so dark with the background, but I'm also lining up with a 1/4 inch of where the edge of the diamonds are for the background as well. You'll be able to see them when they're on camera, but I've got everything nice and lined up. I'm happy with where it's at, so we can give that a trim. And now we have a nice wedge with a nice straight edge over here that's going to form the edge of your quilt. Now, one thing you're going to want to do is this entire edge that we cut off is now biased, and that's not a good thing to have on the edge of your quilt unless you secure it first. So what I do, and I do this on every single top that I do, but especially you'll want to do it on this one, is just sew a stay stitch along the edge of your quilt top, and that's just an 1/8 of an inch stitch away from the edge of it. And what that's going to do is it's going to help your quilt top hold its shape during the quilting process so that these edges can't get stretched and warped as it's pulled and pulled in different directions, whether you do it on your home sewing machine or your long arm. And it also is going to keep these seams from popping open as well. So you're going to have a nice edge to your finished quilt because this one wasn't designed with a border. You certainly could add one if you wanted. I've had friends who have done it and it looked fabulous to get it to have a nice hang and drop over their bed, but I left it borderless for my original design. So that's that. I'm going to show you one more thing that you need to know for your center wedge. So the wedge we've created is our wedge that's here and here. So you're still also going to make your center wedge and then your wedge to the left, which is the exact reverse of this one. So instead of everything going off to the right, it's going to go off to the left. So once you have those completed, you're going to sew your right wedge to the center and your left wedge to the center. Then you have your halves and you sew your halves together and you're done. So there are 0 Y seams in this at all, period. When you join your wedges together, you just pin them in the exact same process as you did when we were joining our diagonal rows together. Super fast, super simple once you get the hang of it, and you definitely will have the hang of it by the time you get your wedges together. But just make sure you're really careful when you are cutting and when you are pressing, and then everything will turn out. You won't have any crazy, B cups popping out in your center as long as you start and be really careful when you're cutting right at the beginning. So this is explained in your pattern, and there's a layout diagram for it as well to illustrate it for you. But I wanted to show you it on camera. So with that center wedge that's coming out at the top and bottom of your quilt, that has straight edges to start with. You don't have to trim those off because we're going to trim our diamonds ahead of time when we put it together. So I wanted to show you how to do that. So I've got my diamond that I cut from my strip at the beginning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line the 1/4 inch mark of my ruler up with the points of it. And I'm going to cut 1/4 inch to the right of those points. So that way when I trim this off, I have one tiny triangle and one triangle that looks like it has little dog ears cut off of it already. What this does is when you sew it together, this is going to be your seam allowance and it's going to fit exactly and have a nice straight edge when you do your center wedge. So that's the only thing that's different between doing the corner wedges and the center is you're going to need to cut some of these to be the edges of your rows. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial from Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I know this isn't our easiest pattern, but if you are an intermediate quilter and you're looking for some new skills, then 60-degree triangles are awesome because they're not challenging once you get the hang of it, and cutting and making sure that everything is the right size and making sure you have that point on top for any of the ones that you do for ours. But they're really fun. They've got a great effect when they're all put together. They're really pretty, and when you do it our way, there are never any Y seams ever. So you can get it together, it can look stunning and beautiful, and it really isn't that challenging once you break it down. So I hope this video gave you the confidence to give this a try. Again, we've got the pattern Medallion Star over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We have a downloadable color guide that you can print off. So when you get the pattern, you can also get that color guide. And what you can do is you can cut little bits of fabric off of the fabrics you're considering using and actually audition those by laying them out on the printable PDF so you can get a look of what it's gonna look like in that final design. Or we have some kits available as well. This is actually the third colorway we've done these kits in because this pattern has been so popular. So if the ones that I demoed with here are sold out, we probably will do more at some point. I know I'm considering redoing one of these and fussy cutting some of my favorite big designs out so that way they're, you know, we've got little animals poking out at me in the diamond. So the possibilities are endless. It's a really great stash buster. You can use it with one of your favorite lines, and it really is a lot of fun to do. So I hope you give it a try. And you can get everything over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. This pattern is also available in local quilt shops, so definitely check your local quilt shop first to see if they've got it. If not, you can always get it from us. Thanks so much for following along. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. We're putting out new video tutorials every Monday, and if you hit the bell notification, you won't miss anything. So thanks so much, and happy quilting.